Hello, good morning, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio, coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Right now, on one of the TVs in front of me is on two different channels. Where are we? Live, Ankara, Turkey. Now, I haven't been to Ankara yet. I've been Istanbul. I've spent a lot of time in Istanbul, and I love it. And I like flying in there. Ankara is the capital, but Istanbul is where all the shipping is and Straits of Bosphorus. It's freaking beautiful. If you get a chance, you need to go and fly Turkish Airlines because they give you a free tour. If you have a layover there, you either get a free night stay somewhere. It's part of your ticket, or they'll give you like once I got a boat trip through the Bosphorus for like 6 hours. They take you to lunch downtown. You know, every time you go, you get something else. It's part of your automatically included as part of your flight if you have a layover, right? So they want to show you downtown Istanbul, and Istanbul's just beautiful. And I once at night, it was really cool. They took me to a nighttime walk along the Bosphorus at night. It was fantastic. And and they had great, beautiful malls down there and excellent. I went to this restaurant that the best seafood. Oh, it was fantastic. And, sorry, just saw a guy kiss a guy on the TV. It's like, I don't need that. Come on. That's not something you want to wake up to. This is great. Thanks for that, being on Pluto TV or whatever it is. It's not good. But anyway, all the videos right now are showing on the news from Ankara, Turkey, is that Erdogan met Trump at the, looks like it's at the palace. Is where they are, and they're taking a photo op now where the two of them are together, and they want to talk about how close they are. They're really not all that close, to be truthful, but they, Erdogan has been around for a long time and thought of as generally a pretty good leader, but he's going to be critical about what's going on in Israel, no doubt there. And anyway, before the summit really gets kicked off. And I thought the summit was 7th and 8th. Isn't that today and tomorrow? Because right now, if he's coming in there, what is it, at 7:30 here, that means it's 8 hours ahead there. They got to be, 3:30. And that means, they're coming. Maybe they have a dinner tonight. I don't know. I don't know the schedule. I haven't paid attention to it. I've been looking at so this is important to me in seeing what happens on the NATO thing because old money grubbing Green Goblin will be there for another 80 to 90 billion bucks. The propaganda is everywhere on both sides. Talked quite a bit about it yesterday. And everybody wants to ignore the pattern that has been developing, which I'm going to go into somewhat today on the eve of these talks where they're trying to get Trump to come in and want him to, I don't know what, to turn Russia into the enemy that isn't for us. And they really aren't the enemy for Europe that people want to have. Certainly not the enemy for Turkey. And Turkey and Russia are still relatively close, NATO membership or not. And it's, they're Black Sea partners. They have to go through there. They are pretty close because of that. And, Turkey has generally stayed pretty quiet about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Now, that's not the Green Goblin's role. He's going to be there to with his hand out for more money. They're poor. They got nothing. There were articles, and a commanding general gave a speech yesterday. And you want to know whether Ukraine is winning or losing and why this is so important is think about this. There's a general named Mikhailo Fyodorov, who's Ukraine's defense minister. I can't remember. Well, I don't think he has rank anymore, but he was military. Now he's just a defense minister. It's a big deal. And he has several links. It came from Interfax, the new voice of Ukraine. Business Insider also ran it. And basically what Fyodorov said is Ukraine is working. You want to know if Ukraine's winning or losing. think about this and connect the dots, okay? Fyodorov said Ukraine is working for the first time to directly contract procurement of PAC-3 anti-ballistic missiles. German. He said Ukraine still receives missiles from the U.S., but not enough to fully supply Ukrainian air defenses. And thanks to Germany, he said, thanks to Germany, we concluded a large contract for hundreds of these missiles, deliveries which will begin next year, 2027. Ukraine still receives missiles from the blah, 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 blah. But here's what he said. This is public. He said this in public, okay? But we want to borrow these same type of missiles from some countries, including Germany, right now, so to speak. We need to borrow them right now, and we will return them later after we get them from Germany. So the guy said this in public, on a public channel, okay? This is, Ukraine has future deliveries. We got those coming. But the deliveries will begin next year. Meanwhile, we need our partners to pony them up now, and we'll give them back to you later. And if you believe that, I got the Straits of Bosphorus and Turkey to sell you. How about that? And the new voice of Ukraine says the same thing this way. Fyodorov said Ukraine signed a major contract for hundreds of PAC-2 and PAC-3 missiles, deliveries to begin next year, but wants to borrow missiles now from some countries and return them later. Business Insider says on July 6th, because of the Kiev strike, where virtually every Russian missile got through, Ukraine did not intercept any Russian ballistic missiles in that attack. And Zelensky said the reason was because they have insufficient interceptor supply. And Fyodorov said Russia is exploiting this critical shortage of Patriot interceptors and these PAC-2 and PAC-3. So Russia is bombing at will in Kiev right now, and they're bombing the snot out of it. Because they're retaliating, number one, for strikes and killing of women and children and stuff like that, bombing of buses in Russia, which we'll get into in a minute. So basically the plan for Ukraine, here's their brilliant plan, which they're selling you in NATO. Okay, this is a big deal. They need that $80 billion to try to figure out how to get them the next $80 billion. They just got $90 billion, couldn't have been 3-4 months ago. So it's every 3-4 months they need another $80-90 billion. Just to pay for, all the oligarchs stealing all the money, all the corruption over there, and none of it gets to the front lines. In fact, none of it, 2/3 of it, never leaves Europe. So the money gets filtered through Europe, and maybe into the U.S. if you're buying some of the NATO stuff. And oh my God, there's a poll right now. What should the U.S. do about NATO, withdraw or stay in? And 57% say withdraw. I don't know why we're part of it anyway. We're basically it. Now, I don't know that I have concrete feelings about it one way or the other. I think if we're not going to dictate what's going on with it, we need to get the hell out of it. And I think it ought to focus on the North Atlantic and not over in the Southeast Asia. I don't understand what that's all about. But if Ukraine, is saying, give us your interceptors now, when our contracted interceptors arrive next year, we'll replenish them. We'll give them to you then. Yeah, but you're going to be out of them then. You're not going to have any more then. And so when they arrive, you're going to be in the same thing. And if people really believe that they need them for their own defenses, then they're not going to give them up. My bet is nobody gives them up right now. That's what I would say, that nobody gives them up. So if Ukraine is already out, Russia's increasing the scale of its ballistic and hypersonics now. What does next year solve? And if next year's deliveries are pledged to backfill countries giving up missiles today, then the future missiles aren't really a new strength, are they? They're repayment. So it's just roll over your credit card debt to another credit card. And meanwhile, you don't have any people. It's a very big admission buried in the NATO air defense story. And Ukraine is losing the war behind the headlines. There's no doubt. It sounds clever. If you wish, it's a clever idea to go out and roll your debt into something new. Oh, I tell you what, we bought those contracts from you that next year. How about you give them to us now, and you take the ones that we got next year? I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Wimpy. From Popeye the Sailor Man, we could do that. If Ukraine is running out of interceptors in July 26 and the next major contract batches don't begin getting until 27, and Ukraine is asking NATO to strip their own shelves today in exchange for promises that they might get a replacement missile later, what's going to happen when next year arrives and they're already spoken for and they're not a new reserve, for Ukraine? Russia knows this. That's why they're beating the snot out of Kiev right now. And Russia isn't just hitting targets. They're hitting the calendar. They're hitting the gap between what NATO promised and what NATO can actually deliver. And it's the same thing we've seen on the ground. So Ukraine lying about this, okay? The latest is Konstantinovka. Whether Konstantinovka, the city we talked about yesterday, has really fallen or not. In front of this NATO summit, they can't admit that it's gone. They can't do it. But here we are. Do you remember Bakhmut? Bakhmut was 2.5 years ago. We never, the Russians, we never lost Bakhmut. Oh, my God, we didn't lose Bakhmut. Those Russians are nuts. Bakhmut is 100 kilometers in the rear now, and nobody still admitted to losing it. You never admitted it. Same thing with Pokrovsk. Remember I was talking about Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, all these areas 5 months ago? What about that? They never lost those cities either. Meanwhile, now we're in Konstantinovka, and the Ukrainians want to keep saying, well, we got Konstantinovka, and then they'll admit it in a few weeks that Konstantinovka really has fallen. But they won't do it right now because they have to have something positive. So what are they doing that's positive? The same logic is as with the air defense war. We just have to keep the narrative going to get the next batch of money. That's it. We need the next pile of 80,000. Ukraine didn't lose Pokrovsk till the map quietly changed. Ukraine has not lost Konstantinovka, according to Kiev. Russia says they have 13,500 dead Ukrainian soldiers in Konstantinovka right now, and they offered a pause for them to come and collect the bodies. Ukraine says, we're not going to come get them. So Russia will take them, freeze them just like they did. And then once again, when they change bodies, Russia will get 50 to 100 bodies and they'll give up 10,000. That's what's happened historically. Back when they had the first meetings in Istanbul, when they were talking in Istanbul, they exchanged some 18,000 or something dead soldiers on the Ukrainian side, and Russia got in exchange like 320 of theirs. I don't know. The Ukraine's plan is not a victory plan. It's borrowing air defense against a missile campaign, telling lies right now about the status of everything, with replacement missiles paying back this missile debt next year. But they'll already be owed to somebody else. Now, last night and the night before, 3 nights in a row now, I've been watching the videos, and these are Ukrainian-made videos. These are people shooting from Ukraine and posting it on Telegram on the internet. There were some major explosions, and there are reports, and they've took out. They say it's a uranium depleted shells that they took out, and a warehouse full of what do you call them? The missiles that the rounds that scatter, fragmentation type missiles, the ones that they used on the shores of the ocean down in Crimea on that Sunday afternoon, kill family. The Ukrainians did, and that was several years ago. But, it's hard to forget that kind of thing, that you would attack families on a Sunday afternoon. That's crap. And so there was another video that I took, and I'm going to share most of it with you, at least a heavy-duty part of it. There's the ambassador at large for the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And his name is Mironovitz. What the hell's his name? We'll have to get to him. Ambassador at Large, Radion Valerievich Miroshnik. And Rodion, I like listening to him. He's been on many of these talk programs that I listen to in Russian, and he was initially connected with Lugansk and the Lugansk People's Republic. He was involved in the government over there, like a member of, the parliament or something like that. Okay, and right now he's assigned to military and terrorist crimes by Ukraine and Western support structures. And before that, he was connected with the political diplomatic structure. Russian Foreign Ministry lists him as the ambassador at large since 2023. And so basically, he gave like a 20-minute discussion yesterday because, like I've told you before, the only thing Ukraine has left is drone warfare. That's it. They need more drones. And they have guys in basements shooting drones. I watched several videos yesterday of Russians. And what they're doing is the Russians have their drones, their reconnaissance drones are out flying around. And I saw several videos. This is really, it's not distressing, it's not troubling, it's war. I mean, I get it. But they're showing this on video. And you don't get it, you don't see the blood and the gore, but you know what happened because this is how they show it. And several of them yesterday are how they're taking out drone operators inside of Ukraine. And they keep pushing them further and further back, but the drones keep getting better and better and better. They sent one 2,500, allegedly, kilometers. Now, somebody says there's some Russian sympathizers of Ukraine that allowed this to happen in a city. It was way east, like in Ufa or something like that. It was way east inside of Russia, and further than that, in the, Bashkir and the what do you call it? Baikal, Lake Baikal, north of there. I mean, it was really far east, and they blew up the Ukrainians blew up another refinery in there. And they're saying this wasn't due to increases or improvements in Russian or Ukrainian drones. It's because somebody let a drone take off inside of Russia from a local place, and then the Ukrainians controlled it and flew it from there. So that's Russians are putting up with that stuff too. I imagine the Ukrainians are as well, but there you have it. So these drone strikes inside of Russia are basically all that Ukraine has left. They're losing the war everywhere. And all we're doing is delaying the inevitable by continuing to fund it, right? And so Russians keep talking about the terrorist acts of the Ukrainians blowing up civilian infrastructure. And I'm going to go through that because Miroshnik it was a troubling thing. Showed video, showed pictures of it all. He showed everything. It was pretty bad news. And meanwhile, the Ukrainians are saying, yeah, we're winning. We're blowing up things inside of Russia. And the Russians are instead, the Russians are blowing up crap inside of Kiev. They bombed the crap out of Kiev 3 days in a row. And the Russian Foreign Ministry published a list of companies, of facilities that they bombed and why. And they're all military industrial like factories and stuff like that. And then they're listing these things. Now, nobody's saying that Russia doesn't have issues as well, where they hit some things, but that are civilian in nature. But the targeting, they actually give you a list of targeting. Ukrainians don't do that. They never respond to the buses that are blown up, And Miroshnik's got pictures of the buses. He's got the list of the people who died on the bus. He's got each of their photos and their pictures and their family members. And he's got everything. He's got the full backdrop of all of this stuff. And meanwhile, Ukraine just goes, yeah, that wasn't us. Like Starobelsk. We didn't do that. That wasn't us. Okay, who was it? Yeah, Russia's blowing their own stuff. Yeah, that's right. Good call. So before I get to Miroshnik, I will take a caller briefly, see what he has to add today. Hello, sir. How may I help you? Hello? Hello? I got nothing. Okay, well, maybe not. I thought we had a caller, but apparently we don't. So we will get into Miroshnik and what he was saying, because it really was troubling. And he starts out with these claims that in quarter two, 2026, at least 3,040 Russian civilians were killed or wounded by Ukrainian action. 422 deaths. This is a 76% increase from the prior quarter. He's claiming that they, since February 22, civilian casualties from Ukrainian drones inside of Russia are 30,913, including 8,434 deaths. These are not military deaths. These are civilians that are being targeted. And under international humanitarian law, parties must, under the Geneva Convention, distinguish between combatants, armed combatants, and civilians. And intentionally directing an attack at civilians is a war crime. So the database identifies the principle of distinction between these two as a fundamental rule that requires parties. This is a fundamental human law. This is something that everybody is signed up for. That they have to do it. So probably the biggest deal is, and there were at least 6, 8, 10, and I've seen these over and over and over again, these bus attacks. So Miroshnik is given his speech, and he's angry. I mean, you could hear him talking about this, and he's talking about just the quarter, but he's listing a whole bunch of things about buses. He discusses attacks on passenger buses in Kiev and Kiev in the Donetsk People's Republic that killed 8 people and injured 12. And you should see these buses. I mean, they are blown the hell up. And it's a marked civilian bus hit at night while people in it are sleeping. Now, I've traveled by bus inside of Russia. It's actually pretty cool. They have beds inside of there. So the buses, they're stacked like a bunk bed, right? And so you get in there, there's a bathroom in the back, but all this is beds. And it's a big bus. And and you get in there, you got a private little cupboard, basically, you're sleeping in, and it's you got to plug in for your phone and for all. It's a pretty cool concept, and it's for traveling further distances. And I took it across, was it Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan? Couldn't remember. I can't remember, but we might have done it into Grozny from Vladikavkaz. Can't remember, but either way, I've done it a couple of times, and it's like being on a train, in a train car, and they have these sleeper places. Well, these are sleeper buses, and you travel at night, and it'll be a 6-8 hour trip, and you get in there and you go to sleep, or you watch a movie, or you do whatever while you're in a perfect world, you sleep. You have to get up to cross the border if there's a border crossing involved. And then, but it's a cool way to travel, actually. And not very expensive. And it's, you meet a lot of cool people that way, too. It's pretty neat. And anyway, so these people are in a bus sleeping at night, and they blow up this bus at night with these people in it sleeping. It's got kids. These are civilian buses. And he says whether the drone targeting was operator controlled, and then he got into a discussion about AI assisted drones that are going out. Maybe that's an AI assisted drone going out and just looking for something that looks military and blowing it up. Either way, the legal problem is the same. The civilian and combatant distinction is ignored in Ukraine, for sure. And they want the Russians to suffer. And that's what, and not, they don't want Russian soldiers to suffer. They can't do anything about the Russian soldiers, or they would, and instead they're attacking buses inside of Russia. And so according to Miroshnik, they're conducting a drone war against civilians. And the briefing says it's from April 1 to June the 30th, 2,760 civilians, large and small scale radio-controlled drone strikes with 371 people killed. That the drone supply to Ukraine during that time increased sharply by NATO in the West. And the result isn't any sort of battlefield victory in Ukraine. They're not using them there. They're bombing inside of Russia against civilian and business targets, okay? Infrastructure targets. That's what they're doing. And, he talked about children. 204 children and teenagers were killed in the second quarter, or were injured. 21 killed. And the example including a family car attack. They attacked a car with some kids in it. And a Bryansk attack on the Belarusian passenger bus. This happened a couple of weeks ago, that carried the athletes coming on a vacation. And a strike on a school in Velika Znaminka. And then repeated strikes. He went into for quite a bit about the repeated strikes on rescue workers and medics. That as soon, they double tap it. Somebody comes in and the Ukrainian forces strike the first site and then strike again when rescuers, doctors, utility workers, emergency personnel arrive. And over that same time period, 31 medical personnel injured, 3 killed, 36 rescuers injured, 4 killed during the last quarter. And Miroshnik says that the Ukrainian fire on civilian infrastructure has risen from 450 to 480 munitions today to 730 to 750 drones per day across Russia. More than 55,000 fired at civilian facilities in the 3 months and in 42 Russian regions. And Ukraine is using drones to place anti-personnel mines as well. And he talked about this. And improvised devices in roads, sidewalks, and pedestrian paths and civilian access routes in places like Alyoshki and in Kherson. They're putting like anti-tank the things you put on the ground and people stumble on or trip on, they're just placing them in the middle of a road, and so with a drone, and then the drone flies away or loses power or whatever. So the timing of all this, that him giving this briefing, is important because the NATO Ankara summit is coming up, and NATO is listing Ukrainian support, defense, deterrence, and investment, more and more investment into this drone warfare is a major summit theme. And Trump is expected to meet Zelensky. Zelensky will have his hand out, and especially after his recent call with Putin and Zelensky. So while NATO gathers in Ankara to discuss it all, Russia is presenting a different pattern, not a battlefield file, but a civilian casualty file. The Western press will focus on, Russia striking Kiev, and those strikes, they absolutely matter, but nobody in America is being asked to consider what Ukraine is doing to civilians inside of Russia, Donbass, Belgorod, Bryansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Crimea, or Belarus. Western reports confirm over the last several days major Russian attacks from July 2 to right now. Heavy missile and drone loose, large explosions, casualties and damage across the city. And there's some kind of a uranium depot that people are talking about, but I haven't gotten a well-placed I don't know, well-placed person reporting exactly what that is, any diplomatic channel. I've only gotten commentators talking about it. And so I don't want to say too much about it, but they claim that there's uranium and military industrial storage target. So I don't want to confirm that until it gets confirmed. But I suppose, you don't want to sit around and say that Ukraine is only killing civilians, but if they're taking 700 drones a day into Russia and not using them to defend their front lines, you wonder what they're thinking. They've already lost the front line warfare, is what I think. It makes sense. They have lost, and that is, the narrative has to continue to be the only thing we can do is be the gnat on the rear end of the water buffalo. And that's what we're doing. And so we're going to keep on bombing inside of Russia because we can't win on the front lines. Why don't they use the same concept and bomb the crap out of the Russian guys on the front lines? Then I wouldn't have anything to bitch about, would I? Nobody's claiming that the Russians are doing the same thing inside of Ukraine on the way there. They showed some videos about, and these videos are harsh. I was telling you about them before, but get out and look up or get out on the internet or YouTube and look up or Telegram and look up the Iznanka, I think it's called Nanka, Iznanka, I think is, or look up Dva Mayora, two majors, DVA Mayora, MA Mayora, two majors basically, and they have this video that you can go out and they take all these videos and put them on Telegram, and these videos will show something like a Russian drone hovering over a place for a good long time, right? And it'll show Ukrainian soldiers come out of a basement of some small house somewhere, set up a Baba Yaga, which Baba Yaga is basically a kid's witch, but it's one of their types of drones. It's a wicked witch. If we're telling a story to kids, we're talking about the boogeyman or the big bad wolf. There, it's Baba Yaga, and Baba Yaga is a bad witch. And so Baba Yaga is there, but they call some of the drones that the Ukrainians make, they call them the Baba Yaga. And so these Baba Yaga drones are out there put on these pedestals and platforms. The workers or the soldiers come, put them out, get them ready, lift them off, go back underneath in the basement that they're in, and they control them from in there. And so the Russian drone will sit there for a couple of times and watch them put them in, and then they'll call in strikes with Fab 500s, Fab 1000s, Fab 1500s, which are those aerial bombs that are guided now. They didn't used to be years ago, but now they're guided. And so they drop these aerial bombs, and basically the military intelligence part is done with the first drone, and then they call in the strikes from the second drone, and they get dropped from a plane that gets fired and from another part of the country, and these things come in pretty quick with these guided missile. Well, they're not even missiles; they're guided. They're FAB. FAB, F-A-B, and they have 500s, which is basically 500 pounds or kilos of explosive. They have thousands, 1500s. There's some big freaking bombs, and these things will come in and take out the entire several houses, to blow it up, where these Ukrainians are there launching their stuff, and the operator that's doing the drone, that's the reconnaissance drone that is sitting out there filming the entire thing, has, from the time he pulled up, watched the video or videoed the Ukrainians setting these Baba Yagas, called in the strike on the specific location, and within a minute and a half, the bomb will show up and blow up the entire place. Now, you don't see the the people getting killed because they're in the basement by that time operating the drone, that they just launched, or the several of them that they just launched. And these sites have 3 to 6 people launching drones from these basements. And so what they do is they go find a place where hopefully they're not going to be spotted. But these reconnaissance drones are changing the way that war is fought. Well, if Ukraine was doing something like that on the side of the front line, which they are too, but nowhere near the same amount of drones, that they're using. They're sending all their drone supply into Russia. and now they're out for more drones, and they're after the political statement that we're winning. Well, how do you win? You make the people of Russia suffer inside of Russia with gas lines, with all that other stuff. And that's the only thing they have left. They can't win in a war of attrition. And so Radion Valerievich Miroshnik, the ambassador I was telling you about, he's basically pointing that out, that they cannot win. They are not victorious. And so all they've done is gone to the default position of we're going to blow up civilians then. We're going to make you pay. Now, I think that's more of an individualized thing, and that there's no control in the Ukrainian army is what I believe. And I believe there's no control, and that these people are, just evildoers on an individual level. Do I believe Zelensky's out there targeting civilian buses? I don't think so. But he is targeting inside of Russia. And, this is the way it pans itself out. I wanted to make a comment about having to find, or how to find, some of these things on the free speech aspect. So a couple of things. There's throttling going on by YouTube. There's throttling going on by all the major propaganda channels around Western media. Same thing is going on in Russia, by the way, in different direction. But they can't always get ours. We can't always get theirs, their news stories. And it's interesting to me because I study some AI and use quite a bit of that in some of the research that I do. I go out and I have several different platforms that I use. Some of them out of China, some, just to see the difference. And I want to say a couple of words about free speech and the control of the narrative, because these claims and these stories, like, I don't expect Miroshnik's commentary, even on the Ministry of Defense of Russia channel, to be there for very long. I think it's going to be throttled or taken out completely. That's what always happens on YouTube. It gets throttled or taken out. It's happening even in AI. And it's pretty funny because if you upload a couple of these links and say, listen, find facts about this from, Times of India, from, Al Jazeera, from Kiev Independent, give me a variety of places. Give me something from Belgium. Don't tell me what the news how it is being slanted, and then tell me how it's being slanted in the United States. And somewhere in between all 5 of those versions, you might be able to find something. So when I download a story, I go, all right, now tell me about this story from other points of view from everywhere else. And part of the funny thing is that the AI slants it. It's pretty funny because the AI will say like, for example, if Al Jazeera says something, they'll say, well, you have to be careful without that source. Make sure to call it an allegation. It'll say, call it an allegation. because that's not verified fact. But if it comes from BBC, it's verified. It's suddenly, and so they slant it all, and they don't give you any such warning if it comes from BBC, from Reuters, from any of that. And all I want to do is point out that that's the same exact thing. We throttle. We in America, we don't put out the news that is really the news so that people can make their own opinion. You put out the slant, and you have to slant it before you release it. And that's the point. And so I argue with freaking AI. It's freaking funny, that you go in there and go, well, wait a second. Why would you say that Miroshnik, and I didn't do this with Miroshnik, but here's an example of how it would work. Why would you take Miroshnik's comments as anything other than Miroshnik's comments? But he is a government official. He's not just some guy with a microphone. He's a government official. He's speaking on behalf of a government, the Ministry of Defense of Russia. He's talking on behalf of them. Marco Rubio, that's words from the horse's mouth. That's not an interpretation by somebody else. It's what he said on behalf of the government. The twist comes when it's all throttled, when it's all blocked, when you cannot get it. Okay? And that's the final, that's the funny part for me, is when you can't get it. And sometimes it's worth reminding people that we're supposed to have freedom of speech in America. And I don't believe throttling by YouTube represents freedom of speech. And so I want to play for you a song because I'm going to take a break. And there's a dude I follow. And I've told this story before, but I don't know. It came across my feed one more time, and I'm going to play it again because I like it. And it's a dude by the name of Super Zhorik. And Super Zhorik is a comedian. I mean, you think of Weird Al Yankovic, but Russian. And he's Super Zhorik. He's short. I think he's Georgian or Armenian. And he's a short, kind of Arabic looking, Turkish looking guy, from because they're in between, whether it's Armenia or wherever he's from. He's from an area in between Russia and Turkey. And anyway, he's Super Zhorik. And the music this is called Zolota. Now, I sang this in the Dominican Republic as karaoke one time. And to great success, there were some Russian people in there going, oh, my crap, an American sang that? We can't believe it. And that I would even know the song. Anyway, it's a funny video, and it's about girls that all they want is gold. And this guy's talking about women and gold. And that, if you have the gold, you get the women, basically.
Приветствуем вас на закрытом показе Golden Fashion 2020. Убедительная просьба, воздержитесь от фото и видеосъемки.
Вай, мама, кто это? Вай, мама, кто это? Это кто это? Вай, мама. Она меня ранит. Я уже на грани, мама, с ума схождения. Я в ее кармане, в золотом капкане. И от любви попутал русские предложения. В первый раз себя не контролю. Мое сердце застучилось. Я походу I love you. Ой, мама, кто это? Ой, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота. Ой, мама, кто это? Ой, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота. Ты просто Месси среди женщин. Лишь о тебе все мои каверзные мысли. Походу что-то здесь нечисто. Ты совершила преднамеренное влюбийство. Поцеловай же меня нежно. Тебя прошу, я помоги мне. Из-за тебя у меня есть же вот эта вегетососудистая дистония. Первый раз такое случилось. Сам себя не контролю. Мое сердце застучилось. Я походу I love you. Ой, мама, кто это? Ой, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота. Ой, мама, кто это? Ой, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота. Мама, кто это? Everybody move your body. Вай, мама, кто это? Вай, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота. Вай, мама, кто это? Вай, мама, кто это? Вся из сусального золота, золота.
I just like that video. It's crazy. So everything out of pure gold, basically everything out of glittering gold. It's the word out of unbelievable gold, basically hard gold, cold hard cash, glittering. Then it's all a bunch of beautiful women, but they all want the gold, right? So that is the song of the day. Super Jorik. See if you can find him, and we'll play one more. We'll play Chow Chow later by him, which is a funny song as well. So I wanted to talk about, because Miroshnik, when he was given the this file, he had pictures of it all. He had the quarter-wide total. He showed the drones and the specific attacks. And he listed all these. April 7, village of Velika Znamenka, Zaporizhia. An active school building where, active evacuation was underway. Ukrainian militants sent several drones to the school. Second strike, double tap after the first. This time they attacked children, teachers, rescuers, and doctors arriving at the scene. 3 civilians, 7 children and 4 adults injured, 3 killed. 2 injured children and 1 teacher, serious injuries, still in the hospital. This is an example of the double tap, or the second strike. You hit the one, so if it's a mistake, why are you double tapping? If it's a mistake, you hit a school, rescuers show up to rescue the kids, and you hit it again. The next one, Syzran, drone hit on a residential apartment building the night of April the 22nd. Astrakhanskaya Street in Syzran. a residential multi-story building. Massive aircraft-type drone attack. One U.S. and it's a huge quarter of the, on one corner of the building, took it out. 2 civilians killed, 12-year-old girl and her 64-year-old grandmother killed, 12 civilians injured. And he says this is a residential building, an apartment building, basically, that they were attacked on April 22. April 25 in Novolubimovka, a family car hit by a drone. Civilian car carrying a family. 1 child killed. He was an 8-year-old boy. 3 civilians injured. A man was born in 1981, woman in 94, and their 10-year-old child were all injured, but the 8-year-old is dead. So a man, a woman, and 2 children. This is a drone hunting as a civilian vehicle. Here's one in Belgorod. A civilian car hit by a drone on April 25th, the village of Bobrova in Belgorod. 2 civilians killed, man and a woman killed on the spot. 16-year-old son survived with a concussion. And he says the son watched his parents die right in front of him. And another civilian car attacked. May 8th, Kyra, Kherson. Father and daughter killed by a drone. A 40-year-old man, his 15-year-old daughter. The girl died in intensive care from severe blood loss after the injury. Another example of Ukrainian drones targeting civilian vehicles. A mass drone attack on May 15 in the city of Ryazan. People asleep. 100 drones intended to overload air defense and strike the city. 4 civilians killed, 1 child, 28 civilians injured, 4 children. 2 multi-story residential buildings attacked and severely damaged. And it's a massive escalation on May 15. Here's the one that we've been talking about in Starobelsk. And I think, him putting this as kind of a 3-month-long tour, I suppose you could do the same thing on the Ukrainian side and put these together, but they never do. Because Russians generally are hitting targets. I'm not saying civilians aren't getting killed too, but the Russians, I'll show it to you, what they're putting out afterward. They have a list of the companies they hit and the address and what they were hitting. They put it out on the Ministry of Defense website. So Starobelsk, that's cool. This is May 22nd. He called it a black day in Starobelsk. It's a student town, a student settlement. 21 young students killed. 18 of the dead were young girls aged 18 to 19 training to become teachers. 94 people affected, injured. Some victims are still in the hospital and undergoing treatment at the time of the briefing. This is the most powerful single incident in the briefing because of the age, gender, civilian, educational complex. And double tap here as well. They had 3 different series of strikes in here. And the building was completely destroyed. And then the West completely ignored it. BBC, CNN, they were invited by Zakharova. Not a one of them showed up. They don't talk about it. You don't want to even notice. You don't want to talk. Just like the girls' school in Iran. Nobody wants to talk about that. And hell, Trump said it was we think it's fake. It wasn't us. It was fake. May 25th, Gorlovka. Entire family killed in a passenger car in Gorlovka. 4 family members, a 13-year-old girl, 12-year-old boy, 40-year-old mother, 43-year-old father, attacked in a passenger car. May 31st, Starobelsk in Belgorod is on the Russian side. Medical brigade hit by a drone. On Starobelsk in Belgorod, 1 medical worker, despite the strike, the doctors picked up a wounded woman and took her to hospital anyway. June 17th, my birthday, Belarusian passenger bus carrying young athletes on a vacation to come into the Russian side. And so they came from Belarus in Bryansk. Group of young athletes were going to Gelendzhik, Russia. A Ukrainian drone blew up their bus. 1 pregnant woman was killed. 8 people were injured, including 6 children. And this is a Belarus bus. And he does not believe these attacks were accidental and were a provocation, is what he said in his briefing. Okay. June the 30th, Donetsk. Emergency ministry team hit while extinguishing fires in trucks. And parking lot, 2 civilian trucks. Russian emergency ministry personnel arriving to extinguish 2 civilian trucks. And after they arrived, they were bombed and injured. The head of the department received injuries and he died en route to the hospital. One injured firefighter helped save a truck driver by applying a tourniquet. This is the secondary strike bit, the double tap. It's part of their MO. And that's what they do. Passenger bus attacked at night. This is unbelievable. 8 people killed, 12 injured. Civilians were sleeping inside the bus. It's one of those sleeper buses. You can tell it from the blown up part. And the operator or the targeting system ignored the fact that it was a travel bus at night. And, if a marked passenger bus is hit at night, it's kind of hard to presume that they're doing anything other than terrorizing civilians. Oktyabrski in Belgrade, an ambulance was hit after, picking up somebody. 18-year-old young man injured in an initial attack, and when the personnel arrived in an ambulance, another drone hit that ambulance. 3 ambulance workers injured. Here in this drones mining, he went over some of those. A journalist from Azerbaijan asked him why this. It's kind of a different, I don't know if this was a planted question or something from somewhere else, but it was a journalist from Azerbaijan. Afterward, the guy started taking questions. Do you remember the Crocus incident that was implemented by Ukrainian terrorists where they went into the Crocus Theater inside where during a rock and roll concert and just started blowing people away, and they killed like 150 or something like that? Do you remember that when that came out in Moscow a 3 years ago? He said, why would the Ukrainian forces hit Crocus and Sadovod? They couldn't hit those places by accident. And Miroshnik says, he said the Ukrainian side wages a terrorist war intending to intimidate the population of Russians, including Ukrainians in Russia, Azerbaijanis, Armenians, and others. And, this was an older attack. But there was another Belarusian bus attack that is obviously outside of the second quarter that happened just a couple of days ago. Belarus 1, there was a journalist from there, and he said there had been more attacks on buses with Belarusian children over the prior 2 weeks, and that a second case occurred literally the day before yesterday. And Miroshnik says he doesn't believe the attacks are accidental, and it's a deliberate provocation action connected to threats and pressure against Belarus. Do you remember Zelensky a couple of weeks ago saying, we're going to attack Belarus? You either get rid of the stuff you have on the front, on the borders between Belarus and Ukraine, or we're going to start attacking you. Meanwhile, they're attacking their buses that are going back and forth inside Russia. Well, that would mean I got my visa yesterday, by the way, and so I can go to Russia now. My passport finally came back with my Russian visa. And last year, I went from Minsk, Belarus, to Moscow by train. Does that mean they're going to start blowing up trains and I need to be careful about that? Or if I take one of them sleeping buses because they're pretty cool, you had 8 hours to drive, might as well sleep in a bus. But now if Belarus buses are getting bombed when they head into the Russian side, I mean, Belgrade is south of the Moscow line to go from Minsk to Moscow. But if you're going from Minsk to Kazan, geez, you'd be going right in the area where they're blowing people up. And do I want to take that risk? I would, just to, I'm not saying I want that. I don't. But I certainly wouldn't not travel. Let's put it that way. But there were, once again, they're attacking people that are clearly traveling on passenger buses. This is terror. This is what this is. And I don't know. Medical personnel, he gave the totals at a good number. Utility workers that show up, 31 of them, 33, I'm sorry. 7 killed and 26 injured utility workers that show up. And they gave, it's a good number of the ones that they provided. And, you shouldn't discount these things just because it's put out by the Ministry of Defense of Russia. You shouldn't discount those. And they always show it with the backup, and they always invite people to come and see it. Hell, if I had the backing, I'd fly over there and see it and broadcast from there, no problem, and have them show me. Hell, that's what I ought to do. I ought to go over there and see if they'll show me Starobelsk and see if I can go see it. Wonder if I imagine I could get to Starobelsk. I might have to do that. We're going to get into the Kiev attack from last night, the last half hour, but I'm going to play one more Super Zhorik for you because it's funny. And this one's Chow Chow. And this is also a Super Zhorik song.
Ladies and gents, everybody clap your hands. Are you ready to rock and dance? Here is your music brother #1, Super Zhorik.
Летим на Арарат. Музыка качал, ночью будет горячо. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Музыка качал, потанцуем по-фачау. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Музыка качал, никого не замечал. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Все мимо кассы, ты в спор, бэйби, я твой приговор. Ты мой ор выше гор, мне не хватает кислород. Ты моя #1, я твой best of the best. Ты моя Кардашьян, я твой Канье Уэст. Музыка качал, ночью будет горячо. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Музыка качал, потанцуем по-фачау. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Белиссимо, бомбиссимо, и много еще биссимо. И моя жизнь полнissima, лишь от тебя зависима. Ты вино, я глоток, по телу холодок. Это это между нами тик, между нами ток и бриллиант. Я карат, ловлю твой смелый взгляд. Я завожу свой аппарат, летим на Арарат. Музыка качал, ночью будет горячо. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао. Музыка качал, танцуем кофачау. Я влюбился, отвечал, остальные чао-чао.
Ciao, ciao. Muzika kachao. Nochu budget gari ciao. Let's see. My favorite part of that song is when he says, Timoy Kardashian, you're my Kardashian. Ya tvoi Kanye West. I'm your Kanye West. I find that just hilarious. Anyway, I don't know why I like that song. It's pretty stupid. Both of them are pretty stupid, but they got a good beat, and it's super Jorik, and it's a lot of fun. And people dance to that stuff, and especially when you go to resort towns. And so I've run into Russians in some interesting places in the world. In Mexico, saw a guy with a huge hammer and sickle on the side of his neck. Obviously living in the past with the Soviet Union, but he was a big dude, and he was with a couple of guys. We had a lot of fun down there, and I like to hang out and see if you can get these guys drinking, which, yeah, you can get them drinking, and have a lot of fun with them, and get them singing songs and talking about military stuff is a lot of fun. To talk about what they did in the military versus what I did in the military and that kind of thing. It's interesting to me, and I like it. But I want to talk a little bit about Kiev under fire and what's coming on in NATO and Ankara and the war narrative. The war narrative, it's breaking. More and more people are thinking the way they ought to be thinking, that the U.S. shouldn't be funding another losing war. And that's what we're doing. Like I said, with the Ankara thing, they were talking about you need to be, what do you call it? The poll, 57% of people want us to get out of NATO. Maybe it's time. I don't know. There's no reason for us to be. I mean, seriously, we don't think the way they do. They're a bunch of nuts in Europe. They're loopy. They are all about war and all about somebody save us from big bad Russia. But what's the problem if the basis for your big bad Russia story is false? That's the problem. That is definitely the problem. So Miroshnik, the guy was talking about on the civilian casualty file, buses, cars, schools, children's rescuers, the military strategic response after the Starobelsk student strike and civilian attacks described. Russia, over the last 2-3 weeks, has begun pounding Ukraine harder and harder, especially in Kiev. And with a different level of intensity. Everybody knows it. Remember me telling you a couple of weeks ago that the people in Russia, we're not pushing them to say, geez, we got to get rid of Putin. Just like the Iranians weren't pushed to say, oh, man, let's all join NATO. Let's all, let Donald Trump bless us with his presence and let him pick our next leader. No, that's not. They dug in deeper. They're proud of their own country. And they've got reason to be. And I don't know about Iran, never been there, but Russia for sure does. And the fact is that the people who believe that this is how you create collapse, like Margarita Semenyan yesterday that I was talking about, and what she was saying is they think that, you push Russia and they're going to collapse. Not so. Ghost Rider. Negative pattern is full. You cannot go there. So after these things, that Kiev is no longer being treated as a politically shielded space. It's now being treated like the military-industrial hub that it is. There were 351 strike and decoy drones, 25 Iskander ballistics, 8 Zircon hypersonic, 25 Ka-101s and Iskander K cruise missiles, and 6 Kalibr cruise missiles, 20 ballistic missiles launched in 15 minutes during one phase of the strike in the last 2 days. This is the second major strike in 4 days, and none of the missiles are intercepted because they don't have any air defense. So Russia's no longer merely answering the battlefield developments. It's degrading the military-industrial fuel, air defense, drone, radar, missile, and ammunition infrastructure behind Ukraine's fighting ability. You know, they don't have any fighting ability anyway, but now they're taking out the other stuff. And all of this is going on while NATO gathers to discuss how they can possibly fund continuing the war, especially when there's nobody left to fight it. July 2, Kiev. RT reports that Kiev and other Ukrainian cities were hit by combined drone and missile strikes beginning around 2 a.m., multiple waves of explosions until 4 a.m. Russian Defense Ministry's position is that it's a response to the attacks by Zelensky's government against fuel targets and civilians, and because Kiev's air defenses were attempting to engage incoming targets but failing miserably. And Russia is degrading their long-range strike capabilities, or trying to, with the Russian Defense Ministry saying targets include facilities that produce drones, missiles, plants making electronic components, and other military infrastructure. The Western and Ukrainian reporting describes the July 2 attack as one of the largest attacks and strikes of the war against Kiev. Kiev Independent reported waves of missiles and strike zone drones on July 2nd. Search and rescue operations concluding on July 4th. Heavy damage, heavy civilian casualties, and Defense News using Reuters material said hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles hit Kiev, killing at least 21, wounding scores of people, and taking out around 130 buildings. July 2nd. July 6th. On July 6, immediately before the summit, several outlets reported another large Russian strike. This one, the videos were, wow. The Times of India described the attack as 68 missiles, 351 drones, 18 people killed, 60 injured, and said the strike exposed Ukraine's Patriot interceptor shortage. They don't have any left. The Guardian reported 21 killed across Ukraine. Kiev has the heaviest losses. Ukraine intercepted some drones, but not the ballistics or hypersonics. And so New York Post says Zelensky's been criticizing the West because the lack of Patriot interceptors after July 6th. And he says the world's inability to supply interceptors to him, his word, absurd. How can you not give it to us? This attack is coming 5 days after another major Kiev attack. And the important military point is this: the Kiev strikes are being treated by Ukraine and NATO as an air defense crisis, which they are. And but I think it's something bigger, that Ukraine's air defense structure can't stop modern Russian strike packages anyway, especially ballistic and hypersonics, because they're so busy taking out the drones. This is change in warfare. So you send over 200, 300 drones. You shoot we've gone through this before, a multi-million-dollar Patriot system shooting off multi-million-dollar Patriot missiles to protect, and they're hitting a drone that costs $5,000. And you flood them with all these, and everybody's doing it. Ukrainians are doing the same thing. And they're using their Flamingo missiles that they've created. They're trying to use those, but Russia's blowing up their infrastructure. So the military point is this: the Kiev strikes are an air defense problem, a big one. And so, if you're firing all of these drones and missiles that I've put out, this isn't random. They are gonna take out the platform against selected targets, and Russia knows exactly where it's hitting. This isn't a few drones and a symbolic strike. This is a layered package. Drones saturate and confuse the missiles. Cruise missiles give volume and range, and Iskanders are speed and maneuvering, and Zircons target Ukraine, are targets Ukraine cannot realistically intercept. The Zircon can't be intercepted anyway. And Martyanov spends, a lot of time. There's a what do you call it? A military analyst named Martyanov, and I like listening to the guy. And he says the Iskanders, which is a primary package, it's very maneuverable. Can go Mach 6, Mach 7. They can't intercept them anyway. And the Patriot and Impact 3 problem is that the Western systems aren't merely short of ammunition, but technologically, they can't stop the hypersonics anyway. He said these systems can intercept subsonic, but not reliably intercept any modern maneuvering ballistic or hypersonic missiles. They're no longer just, so used to be when you were firing a missile, think back to war games and Matthew Broderick or whatever. All of those were missiles that were fired and not maneuvered. They didn't change. You shoot them, they go up in the air, and they come down where you target them. Not so, not anymore. Not ever. Now they can go everywhere. You can guide them, and they can loiter. They're the nuclear powered ones that the Russian ones can loiter for months. They can loiter, and then they can loiter off of the shores of America if they want to. Isn't that crazy? So Ukraine is asking NATO for more interceptors, but the problem is the interceptors can't stop them, the capability. You can't solve a Mach 9 problem with a Patriot. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and it's going to keep on getting worse. I'm trying to figure out, so far, nobody's been able to provide it, and I've been looking while trying to get there to see what in the world that thing is that they blew up in Kiev, because the explosions were massive, and the secondary explosions that blow up. So they targeted the whatever factory it was, whatever it was making. It had to be arms supplies or something like that, and this was unbelievable video. That missile, shock and awe, holy crap, for sure. And it hit a large facility on the outskirts of Kiev. Blew it up. The guy's taking a video from his apartment complex, 20, 30 floors up. And he's videoing this explosion. And the thing is on a massive fire. And all of a sudden, another explosion erupts from inside the explosion that was already there. Not from a new missile, but something there, a secondary explosion. Something in there blew up. And it flew out a good mile, is what it looked like in the video. That whatever blew out of that, blew out, came out, hit a building a long way away. And so it was a wow, something in there blew up. Whatever it was a missile factory of some sort, and something came out of it when it did. And this is massive damage. And this, they were talking about it. Some people were talking about it as if it's a uranium depot of some sort. So this is the controversial part, because if Russia hit this depot and the depot contained depleted uranium munitions, there's a guy named Igor Mosichuk, I don't know if I've said that right, stated in a YouTube interview that the Russian missiles in Kiev hit a warehouse, Vishneva, on the outskirts. He said the munitions depot was hit, and said that whoever placed it near Kiev ought to be, arrested, because why would you place a factory of that nature with depleted uranium and large munitions? I mean, big, because that sucker blew the hell up. And he said the facility contained, and this is a Ukrainian guy, Moiseichuk said the facility had cluster munitions. These clusters are bad in the first place, and we're not supposed to be using them in modern warfare. Okay, but the U.S. provided them all to Ukraine, and Ukraine is using them. But they have these cluster munitions. You know, that could have been what blew up. Something blew up. Shells with depleted uranium warheads, ammunition that continues detonating after the strike, which it did, and the depleted uranium that was not creating a dangerous radiation level, but is intensifying the explosions. So the nearby residents, and this is Ukraine saying this, Ukraine says the nearby residents have to either stay indoors and keep their windows locked and closed. And the Ukrainian outlet called RBC reported that the air quality index in Vishnev entered the red hazardous category before returning a couple hours later to safe levels. That's not good. You know, the same source says that this depleted uranium is not a nuclear weapon, can't produce a nuclear explosion, but it's also controversial for the same reasons it's controversial anywhere else in the world. It's a dense, radioactive, mildly, and chemically toxic, and will create health concerns if dispersed after an impact or explosion. So it's not a nuclear explosion story. It's a depleted uranium storage and contamination story. If depleted uranium munitions are stored near Kiev and they get hit in a strike, the political issue, what is that? Why would you place them there? Who placed them there? Who supplied them? Who knew they were there? And did the civilians get told that they were put there? That this is what was going on? This is also connected to NATO because the U.S. supplies depleted uranium rounds to Ukraine, did in 2023. And Dmitry Peskov warned about these long-term consequences from their use anyway. So if NATO and the U.S. are supplying these and they're storing them outside of Kiev, number one, why? They ought to have their head examined for that. If you're going to store those things, why put them next to the major city in Ukraine? That's nonsense. The Ukrainians ought to be up in arms about this, and apparently they are. And what's the Ukrainian drone response into Russia? The uranium depot source said that Russia faced one of the largest Ukrainian drone attacks of the war last night. 519 fixed-wing drones intercepted overnight in Belgorod, Bryansk, Kursk, Petrograd, that's St. Petersburg, Kaluga, Moscow, Crimea, and in the Sea of Azov. And, there are governors talking about this. A woman killed, 2 injured. Martyanov's discussion of the 625 drones on July 6th I haven't seen any other numbers. I only saw the number come from him. That's not what the Ministry of Defense of Russia reported. But when Ukraine launches hundreds of drones into Russia, Western media talks about, their initiative, this is innovative, this is long-range capability, pressure on Putin. But when Putin answers and sends in hundreds of drones and missiles into Ukraine, they call it desperation. So he's desperate, right? He's desperate, so he's launching drones. No, he's not desperate. He's winning on the front line. And so that, once again, throttling of the news or twisting it of the news is continued. There's some more notes that I wanted to follow for sure because we've been talking about it for about a week, is the fuel and logistics, the gas station wars that are going on. Tell you what, this is I don't want to call it interesting and say that I like this kind of thing because I don't. It's still war. It's horrible. But, the mass strikes in Kiev are getting attention. Russia has been systematically attacking gas stations anywhere east of the Dnieper River. Between Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk, there are no gas stations remaining. None. They're gone. And that's a hell of a drive from Kharkov to Dnipropetrovsk. And you can't get there. If you get, let's say you start in Dnipropetrovsk and you fill up your tank, and you head there. You might get there, maybe, on one tank of gas. Not if you're a big truck, but you might get there, but you aren't getting back. Trains, they're not running. And it's a serious supply problem for Kiev's frontline forces. And this is operationally extremely serious. Tanks, trucks, artillery support, evacuation vehicles, repair crews, drone teams. So I watched a Russian video, said why they were doing gas stations inside of Ukraine. Why gas stations were so critical to take out. And they say that what Ukrainians have been doing is, aside from being in the basement, they're trying to be much more, protect themselves more, mobile, be much more mobile. So they're taking pickup trucks and launching the drones out of the back of the pickup truck. And so you launch them out of the back of the pickup truck, you can drive closer to the front line, launch your drone, and leave. Well, Russia, when they find these pickup trucks, they will blow if somebody's launching a drone and you see it, you can take care of it, but you got to be able to see it and watch it when it's happened. But if you cut off their gas and nobody's moving, those trucks aren't going anywhere either. Those drone trucks. So there's a couple of stories that people have talked about and said, well, the reason they're doing it is because the Ukrainians in the last couple of months have switched from being in basements around to being in trucks and taking out in these trucks and shooting you're safer in a truck than you are in a basement if you're shooting drones. And so that's what they're doing. So if Russia is destroying the fuel and for civilians and military across the entire front support zone, then mobility is going to be seriously curtailed, right? And so the war isn't about only missiles into Kiev. Russia is removing Ukraine's ability to move, to repair, to refuel, to resupply, to drone from a vehicle, or defend itself. Konstantinovka is the final point on this, because if the Russians are correct, and I say they are, everything that I say this is just the same as Bakhmut, this the same as Pokrovsk, and denying that you've lost a major city is par for the course for Ukraine, but it isn't going to change the fact that they've lost the city, okay? It's just additional geography. And the Russians losing 13,500 troops to try to hold it, is another point. They lost at least 10,000 trying to save Pokrovsk. Remember when we talked about that in the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd effort? And they did the same thing right over there. Did the same thing in Bakhmut a long time ago. Every time we go. But the next operational realities are the following. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, this big industrial complex cities. Sumy, the buffer zones up north, and the Russian activity there. The Kharkiv region, 30 to 35 kilometer buffer zone in Kharkiv and Sumy. Dnepropetrovsk, which is where they're cutting off all the gas in Zaporizhia. And then eventually, if this keeps on going, Kherson, Nikolaev, and Odessa, which I said was a potential going back in 2022, but I thought they'd stop at the Dnieper River and only do what they said they would. And but then again, Russia is winning this war of attrition for sure. It has more soldiers, more firepower, more artillery, thousands of more glide bombs, those fabs that I was telling you about, a stronger industrial base, and its own advantage in drones. Ukraine is badly outmanned, outgunned, and Kiev can strike deep into Russia with drones, but Ukraine doesn't have anything like Moscow's deep strike power. And drone strikes inside of Russia have little effect on the battlefield where the war is being settled. Ukraine can irritate Russia, but Russia can dismantle Ukraine. And those are not the same thing. And why does this matter in Ankara? Because the war will not be settled diplomatically because the sides have irreconcilable positions. So it's going to be done militarily. And this is going to be a big loss for NATO. Maybe that's why we should leave NATO. And I'll leave you with that thought. I appreciate you listening to International Flavor today. Join me every day, Monday through Thursday at damradio.com/live. And on Fridays, we do Civic Outlaws, and we'll be here again this Friday. Missed our recording for last Friday, but we'll fix that. We might have to redo that entire episode again this week. Anyway, have a very great Mid-Missouri day. See you tomorrow.